George Belitsos, Executive Director, Youth and Shelter Services, and joining me today for a look at the items from the 1915 time capsule is Farwell Brown, our town historian, very dedicated to the history and educating all of us on the history of the city of Ames and Story County. We are surrounded on all four sides today, Farwell, by items that were removed from the time capsule on a very cold January day in 1996. I know you were there, along with our mayor and several of our city council members, and we had the Kathy Zvek there who represented the Ames Historical Association.
I wanted to be sure I was under the cover. Ames Elementary Schools. There you are.
To barely see it is to see what we can do with it if it's not dust.
Thorne, the historian and preservationist from Iowa State University, volunteered his time and talents to preserve the items that we're going to look at today. Farwell, any memories about that day when we uncovered the time capsule?
Well, I remember that it was cold. The building hadn't been heated for quite a while when we were in there.
4 years.
Yeah.
Finally has heat now.
Right. And somebody had made it accessible.
Right.
So we could look right down into that box that was behind the cornerstone.
It was a handmade box, wasn't it?
I believe it was, yes. And
were you surprised at how well preserved the items were when they came out?
I think I was. I think all but a very few of the items did come out in very good shape. In fact, they came out in as good shape as things that have been preserved in other ways, even in libraries.
It was a very fortunate that we did get the items out when we did, because little holes had developed in the box and moisture was getting in there. So we're very pleased that we were able to uncover the 1915 time capsule, and the people of Ames who there were, I think our population was around 5,000 in 1915, really rallied together to come up with all of these items. Well over 100 items of real historical significance, some of which we're going to look at next.
These items reflect what was going on in 1915.
Yes.
Not only in Ames, but in the country and in the world.
Well, let's turn now to some of the items in the time capsule, and I think it's important to look at the leadership of our city and look at who was on the city council and involved in our community. And so why don't we turn here to the first item that was in the time capsule, and we see the list of our council members and our mayor. Farwell, why don't you
Parley Sheldon was our mayor, and you may recall that he became known ultimately as our perennial mayor. He served as a mayor of Ames over a period of some 32 years, I think 17 years in total, different terms. And he was mayor in 1915 when our city hall at that time was being built. Parley Sheldon was born in 1844, and he lived in Ames. He was a banker, and we'll hear more about that later. The city council members were A.B. Maxwell, the city clerk. M.D. Meltzer was the treasurer. And J.Y. Luke was our city solicitor. Otherwise, I would call him our city attorney. And later he became the first judge of our municipal court. E.H. Graves, that was Ed Graves, was the city assessor. W.A. Ricketts was the city marshal. Art McCoy was the street commissioner. And I might point out that we had two McCoys employed by the city at that time, Art and his brother Oscar, and they were both served on the fire department, volunteers at that time. Wickham, J.Q. Wickham was city engineer. L.H. Morris with the chief of that's Lynn Morris, chief of the fire department, and Earl B. Bush was our health officer, and C.E. Warsaw was the superintendent of the light and water departments.
All of these gentlemen, of course, get the credit for putting this up for a vote, and we're going to show in a minute the newspaper that talked about, the laying of the cornerstone. Why don't we look for a minute?
Can we look at the councilman?
Yes, let's turn to that. Here we go.
Yeah, H.B. Corlett, Councilman at Large L.B. Spinney, Councilman at Large W.H. Stultz, Councilman of First Ward T.L. Rice, Councilman of Second Ward, and Tom Rice had been mayor, or I should say became mayor at a later date, and James H. Gilchrist was a councilman for the Third Ward. Charles Murray was a Fourth Ward councilman, and they were the ones who were making the decisions.
Well, this was a very big decision to put this up for a vote and to build a new municipal building in 1915. Let's look at what it cost Farwell, and this is shown right here.
Right.
Isn't this a very well-preserved document? Look at how well things show up here. Here is the actual budget. And first of all, tell us how the voting went.
Well, first of all, the vote, real quick, the dates sort of slipped my mind. Obviously, it was in 1915. Was 10-1 in favor. Some 330 plus votes in favor, and only 30-odd votes opposing the construction of the new.
And of course, back then, only men could vote. Isn't that right?
I think that was the case.
In fact, we had males on the city council until LeBaron Hilton, Helen LeBaron Hilton was elected to the council.
I think that's right. Well, the general contractor was J.F. Toussaint and Son of Des Moines. There you are. And the heating and plumbing, Macaulay Plumbing of Ames. And W.H. Best, Will Best of Ames, had the wiring contract. And the architects are Lieb, Norse, and Rasmussen of Des Moines, and they also were the architects for the, what was the building on campus?
The Knoll.
The Knoll.
And in fact, they're a very famous firm, of course, no longer in existence. And one of the reasons that the municipal building, now the Youth and Family Center, was made Ames's first historic landmark is the fact that these gentlemen designed the building, and they're very famous architects and have many buildings that they have designed on the National Register of Historic Places.
Right. And Frank Dragoon was the inspector during the construction. The building committee was Charles Murray, T.L. Rice, and James Gilchrist, members of the council.
Now let's make.
Now, I didn't say that the total cost was $41,518 for that building.
What a deal!
Yeah.
Boy, how things have changed. Let's take a look at real quick what the building looks like to make sure that the public is aware. This is, of course, the remodeled building, which is the Youth and Family Center. But prior to this building, and this is the one that has been on that site since 1915. We want to show you now the what it looked like in 1886. So we're going to pull out the newspaper that was. There are several newspapers that were rolled up and in the time capsule. And as you can see here, we're looking at the Ames Weekly Tribune. It was not the Daily Tribune, right?
That's right. It had become the Weekly Tribune just about 1913, 2 years before.
And right here on the front page of the Ames Weekly Tribune on March the 25th, 1915, is the Ames present City Hall and jail. Here's the jail. This is the City Council chambers upstairs and the fire station downstairs, horse-drawn wagon. And here's the question, do we need a new one?
And the answer was yes.
The answer certainly was yes.
Do you notice the date on the little jail building, that little one-story building? You see to the right of the door, do you see that 08?
Yes, yeah, I do.
I think the Ames High School youngsters had they probably didn't have a football game that day, or that weekend, but they had something to celebrate.
So was that, was the 8? What did the 8 mean?
1908, well, it was...
1908. Oh,
yeah,
okay. They were
class
just putting the date down.
yeah.
Oh, I see. Well, that still goes on today.
I'd like to call attention to the article just below the picture. First Annual Music Festival, May 7th and 8th. I believe that's the beginning of a series known as the Iowa State College Music Series. They brought I think the first time that one of the New York Symphonic Orchestras played in Ames was soon followed the opening of that series.
Well, it does say new event.
Yeah, and it became an annual event, and that was, I believe, about the first
And I noticed
beginning of it
the
right
first,
there.
It took place at the Iowa State College gym.
That's
Friday
right.
evening, March the 7th, and Saturday afternoon and evening, May the 8th.
And over on the right-hand lower corner of that paper is the article about a great singer who was appearing that Saturday, a Dutch artist, soloist, was appearing on that series. And of course we have an expanded and much more understood program today.
Now there's a little article about the Chautauqua, and we're going to talk about that later.
Right.
But isn't it fun to look through these old newspapers, and they're so very well preserved.
Right.
Oh, child eats pills containing poison. Well, now let's take a look at
Here's another one.
another newspaper. Now we're going to the next step of laying the cornerstone, aren't we, Farwell?
That's right. And this is the August 5th, 1915 Ames Weekly Tribune. And over on the right-hand side, it says the cornerstone of the City Hall to be laid on Monday. Now, this Thursday has to be 4 days later, so that must have been about the 9th of August, 1915, if my calculation. Does that sound right?
That's right, August 5th, 1915. And what kind of a turnout did we have for that?
There was a huge crowd. There was a parade, and there was a huge crowd on the corner of Kellogg and 5th Street that day. And as the mayor himself, Mayor Sheldon, engineered the laying of the cornerstone, troweled a little mortar in there.
How exciting.
And then Judge C.G. Lee gave the address of the day.
And that might have been about the time they put the time capsule in, wasn't it? Because it was right above the cornerstone.
Right.
A couple of feet above it.
Right. And it was, I have seen pictures of it. It's not in the paper, as it turns out. But that entire corner was one big crowd of people that day.
Wow.
Clear across the street.
Were you there?
I'm afraid I wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't quite 5 years old. I was
Okay.
5 years old a little bit later,
I see.
that same year. But,
Well, this is fascinating. Let's see what else was in the newspaper that day.
yeah. Well, over here on the right-hand side is an interesting article. It says, Council plans to pave 7 miles of city streets.
Wow.
And we had only...
Because we didn't have
We didn't have
paved
any
streets.
residential streets paved.
None. The Main Street was paved
Main
about
Street,
that time.
and I didn't quite say that correct. In 1911, they also paved the Grand Avenue with the wood blocks as they had
Right.
in 1910 paved Main
Main
Street.
Street, right.
But now they were preparing to pave all of the downtown residential streets,
Wow.
north and south streets. And
A very important city function. Think about them putting up a 20 or 17, 18,000 square foot municipal building, and we didn't even have paved streets.
That's
So
right.
It really tells you how important it was to the community to have this new city hall, and the pride that they took in having the city hall and the fire department.
And I can remember distinctly what it was like to have the paving gangs working, because they used mules in those days, and they did a lot of grading first, and the town was dusty. There was dust everywhere.
From the building.
Yeah, from the construction.
Well, now we're going to look at one of the items, Farwell, and we'd like you to tell us about it, that is of real historical significance, and tell us about this gentleman.
Well, this is William West, and he was the first mayor. The town had incorporated in December. Actually, they voted in December of 1869, and they had their first election, and William West was elected the first mayor. William West and his wife operated the what was known as the West House. It was the first hotel in
it was.
And which stood right where the Octagon is today.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
And William West, when this picture was taken, that picture is contemporary with the building of the City Hall, I believe. He was in his 90s, and his death occurred about 3 or 4 years later.
Well, it's a beautifully preserved photograph. It's a wonderful photograph.
It is. And he, at the time of his death, he was residing with a daughter who lived in Rock Rapids, Iowa. And we have quite a tribute to him that was in the papers at that time.
Now, here's another photo that was in the time capsule. And who is this, Farwell?
Well, that's A.B. Maxwell. A.B. Maxwell came to Ames as a boy, and I think his father, we have an obituary somewhere for the father. David Maxwell, I think, was his name, but the Maxwell's owned that Ames Hotel, the same West House after West had retired from operating it, and A.B. Maxwell worked with his father at one time in the operation of the hotel. But he studied medicine subsequently and became a medical doctor.
I'm going to flip the card over so that the viewers can see that on the back of a lot of the photographs that were in the time capsule was a description of the person. They didn't know if, we would know in the future who these people were. And in fact, without your help, some of them we wouldn't know who they were.
Well, he came, this is what I wanted to say. He became a part-time city clerk in 1889, serving until 1896, and from 1902 until 1915, at the time they wrote that, he had been a full-time city clerk, and of course he continued as a full-time city clerk
he had a lot
for many years after that.
A lot of different jobs, didn't
Right,
he?
and after that, his hobby, as mine has been, was the history of Ames.
Oh, is
and
that
he
right?
prepared quite an album of pictures and commentary that's in the Ames Public Library on the history of Ames.
What a great man he is, or he was, and certainly we owe him a debt of gratitude for preserving all of this, and it's no wonder he's in the 1915 time capsule.
Right.
Very important to the community. Let's look, Farwell, at some of the, a lot of the churches in town had placed photographs and information about their church, their congregation. They even have choirs pictured. Tell us about this church.
Well, that's the first Christian church. They had acquired the original Methodist church that had been down the corner of Main Street and Kellogg, and had moved it to the corner of 5th Street and Kellogg. And then, I don't recall the exact year, they built a new church, which you're looking at here over on the corner of Burnett, the northeast corner of Burnett and 5th Street.
Now let's look at another church which is no longer there.
Here we go. The one on the corner there is the First Baptist Church. Now, the First Baptist Church frame building was built there in 1872 on the same location, and this one, a stone block building, was built and was dedicated in 1910.
So this church is certainly not standing today, but it's quite a large structure, isn't it?
That's right.
And what is this right here in the middle of the street? It's I guess this is Kellogg and 5th Street, so it's right across the street from where the municipal building is now.
That's right. Well, most everybody in town had a horse, you know.
Yes. So.
And horses had to be watered.
So is this a fountain?
That is a watering trough.
Watering trough.
So,
well, what is this thing sticking up from the middle? Did water come out of there?
Yeah, the water came out of the middle, and there was the water, sort of a cap on it, so the water seemed to stay fresh. It was flowing out.
Wow.
I do remember it, but it's rather vaguely. See? Yeah.
Well, this says Ames, Iowa, 52.
Well,
is
that
right?
52 is the photographer's
Oh,
number.
photographer's number. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's look at another church in the time capsule. This one is a little faded, but some people may remember it. It's no longer there.
We're looking at St. Cecelia Catholic Church, the first one that stood down there on Lincoln Way. And I at the moment, better describe it as being just north and west of the highway, or DOT as we know it today. Whether that was maple or oak, I can't quickly be sure. But that was removed a few years ago, and St. Cecelia School was just north of it, you may recall. And they've built a new St. Cecelia and a new church up on the north side of town. Now, I think the date on that Catholic church was about 1900 or 1901, when it was built, I should say.
And I do remember when I first came to Ames in the early 70s, seeing that church and actually attending a service there. And then I think it was vacant for a long time, and then torn down. And boy, it was right there on Lincoln Way for all the world to see, and now it's gone. Let's look at a church that is still standing and was there in 1915.
That's right. That's the Congregational Church and Parsonage, and that part of the building that you see prominently there is still a part of the church that's on that corner. Notice the change in elevation since then.
Right.
When they paved the Kellogg in 1916, they lowered the grade of the street and required steps up.
Right, now it's sort of there's a little incline there.
Embankment, and they lowered the sidewalk.
Well, let's take a look at what Ames Main Street looked like in 1915. This is an actual color postcard that was in the time capsule, and I think they didn't have color photography, so what did they do? How did they get this to look,
With color?
Yes.
Well, they were, until after World War I, we didn't have expert coloring postcards. I don't see indication here that this was colored or produced in Germany, but many of our colored cards at that time were. They had to be hand-colored, obviously. You notice the yellow dress, yellow skirt on the woman on the right-hand side, and the streetcar, the variation in the colors.
Now, was that the dinky or the interurban?
Well, that's the streetcar, electric streetcar. The dinky actually was a steam
Oh,
car.
it was. Okay,
It preceded.
so if it's electric, it's the interurban.
Yeah, the interurban was part of the streetcar system. But you notice the bank building on the right, that was the Ames National Bank, and built in 1912-13, and so it was a quite new building.
Isn't that where the Ames Stationery is today?
Ames Stationers today, and they've taken the top floor off of it. And where the building that the YSS is in is the next, almost the next building down there. It was built in actually built in about 1895.
Well, this is where Lazy M Shoe Store is on the first floor.
Right.
Now here's a neat photo. I mentioned that some of the items in the time capsule were of choirs and individuals and churches, and this is I just hope when we put in the new time capsule, we'll have a lot of churches submitting things like this.
Right. Well, that is the choir of the
back.
Congregational Church, and Mrs. A.B. Maxwell was the director. You notice the custom in those days to refer to women as Mrs. A.B. Maxwell?
Yes, on all of these things, it has it that way. I wonder why. What was the tradition?
Well, you look at the membership in women's clubs and so forth, and that's the way they're listed.
They never gave their names.
Seldom.
Very seldom.
Yeah.
Things have changed. Now we're going to look at a school, which I don't recognize.
That was the first brick school built in Ames.
Is it?
In 1881.
That's really, it's a beautiful school. Where was it?
Well, it stood right where we are today.
Oh, really?
Right on this spot.
Okay.
Right.
So that was where
the
current City Hall is today.
That's right. It was torn down in 1937, in preparation for the construction of the building we're in right now, when that was being built as an Ames High School. In 1900, they added that additional four-room addition that you see to the right in this picture in 1900. You might be interested in knowing that that four-room addition cost $1,000
Wow.
in 1900.
For that whole building,
Right.
that whole addition.
Yeah.
Here's another school we'll look at, and this one maybe some of the viewers will recognize. It was Ames High School at one time.
That's right, and I graduated from Ames High in 1929 from that building. It was built in 1912, opened, I believe, in the fall of 1912, and removed in 1981. Today it's a parking lot. It's right across Clark Avenue from where we are right now. Now here's the First Methodist Church. We got a little bit of a glimpse of it when we looked up the street past the Baptist Church in an earlier picture. That building was dedicated, I believe, in 1908. It was the second Methodist building on that corner. It's the southeast corner of 6th and Kellogg. They had moved up to that corner from the original Methodist chapel that had been built many years before down on the corner of Main Street and Kellogg.
Now, Farwell, I just pulled this one out of the big pile here because I think, you know, after all these years, and this gentleman put this photo of himself in the time capsule, that we ought to put it on cable TV.
Right. Well, that's A.F. Allen, and he was the secretary of the Ames Building and Loan. And the Ames Building and Loan was a young institution at this point, and I think it had been in operation only about 2 or 3 years. And in 1915, I believe somewhere there's a financial statement among the papers.
Oh, yes, there is.
I think their assets total a little over $7,000
Yes.
at that point.
Yes.
But he was the secretary. I think he had a banking background, and he came to Ames.
In fact, why don't we put that on, because it's within hand's reach here. We're surrounded by items we could show.
There's that total figure, $7,843.
Yeah.
Dollars.
Let's show the headline. It's the Ames
Building.
Building and Loan Association, and we'll come in and show everybody what the great assets were of the building and loan.
Right.
And this was Mr. Allen's.
You see his name up here on the letterhead on the left, A.F. Allen, Secretary Treasurer.
Mm-hmm.
You notice Parley Sheldon?
Yes, boy, he was in a lot of
He
things.
was the president of the Story County Bank, which was right across the street, or within a few feet of it. And it shows the total assets, or liabilities and assets, $7,843.
Boy.
And of course, the Ames Building and Loan became what? The Ames Savings later?
Yes, as I understand it.
And today is the
building and loan must have about 10 or 12 items in there. We're not going to have time to look through them all, but boy, they really wanted to be part of history. I think we should maybe get up and take a look now, Farwell, at some of the items that we have. We're just surrounded by items from this time capsule. It's amazing how much we got. They got into the time capsule, and all around us, as you can see, there are little tags that show, little labels that show what we have to look at. Let's take a few items and show the some of the other what was going on in our history at that time. There's a nice brochure of the city. I'd like you to maybe comment on this. This is a neat little brochure that the city, it says right here, Ames, Iowa.
That's right. And
what was this our theme at that time?
Ames advertises America. The organization that was the same as it was known as a commercial club at that time. It's the Chamber of Commerce today. I think they published that. And you see that slogan, Ames advertises America, on a number of their publications at that time.
This is kind of a night scene. Look at those nice street lights.
Yeah.
Do you remember those? Boy, those are very attractive.
Well, I do, but I'm They sort
Let's
of
open it up and,
Yeah.
and see what they have.
How the college serves Iowa.
Right.
That's a description of all the things that go on that's on the campus that relate to the
And now-
entire state.
Look at right here in the
And-
middle. They have this great photo.
That was a
of
1913 panoramic photo. It was taken by the college photographer. His name was Colburn. And I've always wondered exactly where they took, where they
How
stood.
could they
when
get up that high? Because the first plane hadn't landed in Ames, had it?
Well, it landed later.
Later,
sometime
right.
in
So
that-
how did they get up this high?
Well, I think there was a windmill that stood out there
okay.
just south of where the Memorial Union is today. And my semi-educated guess is that that's where he went to take the picture.
Oh, now let's take a look at this, Farwell.
Yes, this is the picture of the depot, Chicago Northwestern Depot, at that time. And I call attention to the trees and the paths and the gardens that were that you found at the depot grounds in those days. They had a wonderful reputation for their beauty. The college gardener had designed them. In fact, he designed the depot grounds for a number of mainline depots across the country. I want to show you one thing. Just pull that down a little bit and see the water tower.
Yes.
That water tower had been built in 1891, right next to the city hall.
Wow. Oh, yes. That was a wooden water
Wooden-
tower.
Yeah.
Here's something I just put my hands on. It's not a very good photograph, but wasn't this a park next to?
Well, that was the depot grounds.
Yeah, okay, so
And you notice again the path that goes through the middle of it.
that
And
that
people,
went to the depot.
It was all, well, there were places to sit down and enjoy the flowers and the shrubs and so
Well,
forth.
I think the depot must have been a very busy place at that time because there were a lot of men going off to war, weren't there, Farwell?
There were very soon after this happened.
Because the United States then got involved in the First World War, and this is the Des Moines Register, which they had in the time capsule. All of these items, again, are from the 1915 time capsule that we found in the old municipal building. And here's a cartoon. Tell us about
Well,
that.
this is one of J.N. Ding or Darling's famous cartoons. The title is Some Folks Actually Believe It, and this shows the Kaiser trying to control the whole world.
I see.
And you see, we would get into the World War a bit later, but not very long, not much later.
And here we are building a new city hall, 1915. In fact, a lot of development was going on in Ames, a population of 5,000, and we're just getting involved in the First World War. So it's, I think, really important to let the viewers know what was going on in the world at that time and what impact it might be having on Ames, Iowa. And I'm sure they put this in the time capsule because maybe a lot of people, were very concerned about whether the United States was going to get involved. And, of course, we did, and it had a very big impact on Ames itself, didn't it?
That's right, and that cartoon appeared in the Des Moines Register on the very day, I believe, that the cornerstone was laid.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, then that's probably, it's August 9th, 1915, and that's correct.
Yeah,
So that's why, boy, that's a piece of history right there.
yeah.
Why don't we take a look now at a building that's right across the street from the 1915 municipal building, and tell us when this building was built, Farwell.
Well, Ames had needed a hotel. We did have some hotels, but they were outdated and very old. We already mentioned the West House with the frame hotel where the Octagon is today. There had been the Davis House, and formerly had operated under different names down on the Duff Corner. But they were inadequate, and various plans had been proposed, but nothing had come to fruition. At the very time that Ames was planning to building a new city hall, Mayor Harley Sheldon said, "I will put up $65,000, And
Well, there's his name off to the left.
Right.
So it says president.
Right. He was president of the bank.
Oh, the bank. Okay.
Now-
So he also built the hotel then.
Well, he and the Munns.
Okay.
And it became the Sheldon Munn Hotel.
Okay.
Now, this particular ad is advertising the Story County Bank. Now, you see the Story County Bank. You want to point to that right on the corner. See on the, it says bank. Sheldon's
Yes.
Bank occupied the entire southeast corner. That's right at the corner of Kellogg and Main Street. And it had become a state bank, and he operated there until it merged, I believe, in the mid-1930s with the Union National Bank and became a Union Story Bank.
Well, let's take a look now at the a weekly newspaper, and the date is August the 5th, 1915, and that's also just before the time capsule went in. And look at what's on the front page, right here,
Yeah,
German
We're looking at
submarine.
periscope, is that what they
Right.
call that?
Right.
And the war was beginning to rage in Europe.
It says approach of the submarine, and let's open the weekly newspaper. The price was 10 cents. Look, here's the owner's name right there.
Leslie
Kooser.
Kuser.
Yes.
That's Ed Kuser.
Oh, so he decided to donate his weekly newspaper.
That was his copy, see.
Wow.
He was one of the city officers or employees at the time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Well, that's his newspaper, probably delivered to his house. Let's open it.
yeah.
Here they are advertising first page for a Packard.
All right.
And here's the price. It says $2,600.
That was an expensive car in 1915.
Was it? Well, here we are looking at photos from the war. And
Well, this particular photo right up on top is a disaster that occurred in Chicago.
Oh, that's
that
Chicago.
that was a sightseeing ship
Oh, that's not the war then.
that
I'm sorry.
overturned.
Oh, really? I
And-
thought it was a submarine.
It looks like it. You're looking at the bottom
Yeah.
of the ship.
Oh.
And there were over 1,000 people drowned.
Really?
that
I never
day.
heard of
Right.
that before.
And that had just
1,000
happened.
people.
Yeah, just a few days
Yeah, it
before.
says
And,
carries 1,000 to death. No, I had
Yeah.
never heard of it.
Said
So that
fo-
happened just before the.
before they published this.
I see.
And it says, frightful catastrophe in Chicago. The steamship Eastland capsized at her dock in the Chicago River.
Right.
Yes. But then later on in the article, you'll find the things that do relate to the...
Here we are leafing through Farwell, and now we're getting to, I think,
pictures
some photos.
of Europe's great conflict.
Yes.
I see it had not, we were not in it yet when those pictures,
No.
when this was published.
There was a lot of opposition to getting involved in the
Right.
First World War, and
Right.
finally the United States did enter the war
Well,
and
it was
declared war on Germany.
It was the sinking of several of
Yeah, the very submarines.
that sank our ships, you know.
So then we look, and of course, we're seeing people talked about here.
You notice they have a picture of the woman up there at the top, the first
Yes.
woman bank receiver.
How is that?
That apparently was news in
I
1915.
guess so.
Yeah.
Women did not have the right to vote, and of course, it was a right denied them for a long time.
They were a few years later, 1920, it was 5 years later.
Now here we are with lots of information about the war and the world's news. A lot was going on at the time that the City Hall was built.
Yeah.
Well,
And there's the Prussian
that certainly was not, did not hold to be true.
Yeah. Prussian system, Germany's hope.
Look at this. Here's the new Cadillac.
Yeah.
I'd like to get that on so people can see what the Cadillac looked like. Not
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
But I'm sure people were happy to have it. There's tires for sale, war orphans.
I noticed the tire sale.
Yes.
In those days, I don't know exactly how many miles you could get on a new tire, but I don't think it was anything like
No,
today.
it says 5,000 miles.
Yeah.
I guess that was a lot back then.
I think that would be
Well,
maximum.
this is such a well-preserved newspaper. It's just fascinating. It really gives you a picture of what life was like then and what was newsworthy. Well, why don't we turn now to the some other items that our viewers might like to see. And, oh, I like this. And, yeah, let's look at the phone book and what phones look like at that time. Gosh, there's just so many things to choose from in the time capsule. First of all, let's go to the phones. Let's look at what a phone, this was an ad, Farwell, for a phone that I guess was new.
Well, these were the type of phones that were rural, and they were magneto-type phones. You had to crank them. You notice the handle on the side of the
Yes.
crank? If you lived in the country, just half mile out of Ames, you would have a phone like that. And I can't be precise on the number, but I think there were 13 or 14 private lines, rural lines that were organized.
Well, they give instructions on the side. Let's take a close-up look at some of these instructions.
Right.
Receiving efficiency is
Un-
unsurpassed.
Right. And notice the statement, reinforced mouthpiece, rust-proof. You got that. Rust-proof reduces maintenance. That was great, wasn't it?
Well, I guess today you never would have thought of that. Here's
Yeah, that's right.
oh, it
Cabinet
was
is-
oak.
Yeah,
Well,
solid
think of
doses.
having a phone made of oak.
Attractive design. Incidentally, those are collector's items today.
I bet they are. And then they show the inside and tells you, you know, how to utilize all of this. Why don't we turn to one of our most precious items from the time capsule, which is the, I think, one and only copy of the 1915 phone book.
Right.
You know, we are at the point where, you know, we have just so many items to look at, and we will be viewing some of them in other programs we'll be doing together, Farwell, and maybe we'll turn the pages of the phone book and in another show and let our viewers see some of the phone numbers. And I just want to say thank you, Farwell, for joining me today. And we could just go on, and we are going to view some of the other items in other shows. But to thank everyone for viewing this, and for those who want a closer personal look at some of the items from the time capsule, Farwell has inventoried all of them, and they are all stored at the Ames Public Library. So get in touch with your Ames Public Library to take a closer view. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.